Erick, 877-973-7425. Friends, it is that most important anniversary. People are talking about it. And I wanted to do something to remember what so many went through and just give a tribute, if nothing else. So much has changed. It is a momentous anniversary. No, I'm not talking about the COVID 1 year anniversary of shutdowns and lockdowns. No, 15 years ago today in Mobile, Alabama, the leprechaun showed up.
Well, just in time for St. Patrick's Day, crowds are coming by the dozens to get an up-close view at what some say is a piece of Irish folklore.
Some people in the Crichton area of Mobile say a leprechaun is taking up residence in their neighborhood. A leprechaun. NBC 15's Brian Johnson has more.
Curiosity leads to large crowds in Mobile's Crichton community. Many of you bringing binoculars, camcorders, even camera phones to take pictures.
To me, it look like a leprechaun to me. All I gotta do is look up in the tree. Who else seen the leprechaun? Say yeah!
Eyewitnesses say the leprechaun only comes out at night. If you shine a light in its direction, it suddenly disappears. This amateur sketch resembles what many of you say the leprechaun looks like. Others find it hard to believe and have come up with their own theories and explanations for the image.
My theory is it's casting a shadow from the other limb.
Could be a crackhead that got hold to the wrong stuff, and it told him to get up in a tree and play a leprechaun.
We're going to get down to the bottom of this. Yeah, it's still on there, guy. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid, man.
This guy helping to direct traffic says he's prepared for his encounter with the leprechaun. He's suited up from head to toe.
This wars off spells right here. This is a special leprechaun flute, which has been passed down from thousands of years ago from my great-great-grandfather who was Irish. I just came to help out.
Others just came to get lucky in hopes a pot of gold may be buried under this tree.
I'm going to run a backhoe and uproot that tree. I want to know where to go. I want to go. Give me the gold. I want to go.
This is Brian Johnson, NBC 15 News.
15 years ago today, the leprechaun appeared, or it could have been a crackhead. Could have been a shadow. It was 15 years ago today. Forget the COVID anniversary. This was far more important. Speaking of the COVID anniversary, it's also worth noting. A year ago, it was about this time a year ago, Charlie and I just stopped. We had started when we had the first cases here in Georgia. We're listing each county and how many cases there were. And at first it was 1 or 2, and then it became 20. And at some point we just said, look, if you're listening to me and you're in Georgia, you got COVID in your county. For the longest time, it was Taliaferro County had none, and it turned out it was a data error. They actually had them, and it spread everywhere. And while that was happening, more and more people began calling this program. It became a thing last year during the height of the pandemic and lockdowns, where people began calling the show or emailing, direct messaging, that they knew someone who worked in a hospital who said there really aren't any COVID patients in the hospitals, or that the hospitals were instructing them to put everyone dying in the hospital down as a COVID death to get money, or they had received in the mail a positive test for COVID, even though they had never gotten tested. And in every single one of these cases, we tried to get the contact information of the people who it happened to, because it was never the person calling. It was always a friend. And in every single one of the cases, we tried to get the contact information and never were successful. We tried to follow up. We had a sheriff's deputy say he knew someone who was a nurse who swore to this. Like, we can talk on background. We can talk confidentially. I can give them my cell phone number. They can block the number and call and verify. Nope. To no avail did we ever find any of that stuff. And people still believe it. People still attest to it. And yet We tried. There was only one meritorious story that I could uncover in all of the conspiracy theorizing that it really wasn't that bad, and we were going to have no more than 30,000 people dead. That was about 500,000 people ago. And that was, there were people who did get positive notices in the mail, but in each of these cases, what had happened was they were in lines where everyone was assigned a number in the line. They were number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, and they got out of the line and they didn't adjust the numbers to the line. So they were number 2. Well, now number 3 is number 2, and number 3 gets tested and they're positive, and it's number 2 who got the notice in the mail, and they're like, I didn't even stay for the test. How could it be me? Well, it was because the idiots who were doing the test screwed that up. That got fixed very early on. That was happening, and that just took on a life of its own. Suddenly, it was everybody was getting a positive test in the mail when it wasn't actually so. Now, the moral of the story here is this. The internet is a wonderful resource for finding information around the world. The number of recipes I found, by the way, the rib recipe, it got jammed up. I got to send it out today. I will. But you find all sorts of information in the mail. You find, you go on the internet, you can find great information around the world. You can find people's mailing addresses to send people letters. You can find their phone numbers occasionally. You can find the news. You can find recipes. You can find videos. You can find the leprechaun video. You can do all sorts of stuff. But you can also find lies and urban legends that are presented as true. You can find people who sound like truth tellers who are liars. You can find people who doctor up videos to make it look true and it's not true. And you can find people you build relationships with, and you connect to these people in some sort of way. And, well, they're not the people you thought they were. You know, I've had this happen to me on a couple of occasions now. Just full disclosure, where I follow someone on Instagram and we begin to interact over a time, and they seem like a very good, nice person. And over time, you realize that this person is not who they claim to be. You're not seeing truly who they are on Instagram or on social media. You're seeing, well, something they pretend to be, and it just doesn't go well. I've had that happen now once or twice, and it's including, there was an issue this morning we won't get into. But not everything you see on the internet is real or true. And if there's one thing I've noticed in 10 years on radio, it is in the last couple of years, there have been more and more people who find stuff on the internet that they believe are true and start circulating it, even if they don't know whether it's true or not. This has become a real thing, and there's some level. I don't really know what it is. It's just it's interesting to me, though. There's something clearly spiritual happening, but people are more and more inclined to see stuff that they confirms their own biases on the internet, and because it confirms their biases on the internet, they decide it must be true. They don't really go searching deep. Now, the corollary here is that some people can't believe anything they read on the internet, and so they go searching super deep, and they go down crazy rabbit holes, and they discover a bunch of people who sound true, who they see plausibly true, and they believe the person, and that person's the liar. We are about a year from when the lockdowns happened. And, you know, I think it's worth noting in Brian Kemp's case, I think he did a really good job with the lockdowns. I think that he shut us down for a month and built up hospital resources. And the result is that no one in Georgia was denied a ventilator if they needed it. We got regular hospital updates. People were rearranged in hospitals as needed to make sure that they were covered, and he did a good job. And Georgia opened before everyone else, and I think that he deserves credit for that, even if some things could have been done differently. But I also think it's worth remembering how many people read stuff online shared by friends, and they were convinced that that must be the true thing, as opposed to everything the media was reported, because they don't trust the media. Now, you shouldn't trust the media, but you also shouldn't trust your friends online. And that's part of the problem we're dealing with now. But the leprechauns were worth remembering. Now, we need to move to the war on words. There's a crisis. It is a crisis of the word crisis. This has become a thing. There are Republicans who are arguing that the Biden administration needs to use the word crisis. And I was actually watched Fox a little bit yesterday, and it seems like the argument is over the word crisis. It's not actually anything related to what's going on. And what's going on is bad enough, even if you don't want to use the word crisis. This is CNN. Listen to this.
The increasing surge of migrants on the southern border is reaching emergency levels for the Biden administration. U.S. authorities have arrested and encountered more than 100,000 migrants in the 4 weeks before March 3rd, the highest levels for that same time period in at least 5 years. And new data reviewed by CNN shows there are more than 3,400 unaccompanied children in the custody of Customs and Border Protection. Federal immigration officials are scrambling to make room. We're here in the town of Donna, Texas, on the Mexico border, and CBP has just opened up this massive tent facility. This temporary processing site for migrants was opened just over a month ago. A Homeland Security official told CNN the facility is significantly overcrowded, mostly with children. Republicans and some Democrats say the Biden administration isn't moving fast enough to keep the migration crisis under control.
They are completely unprepared for what is going on the border now, and they're going to be even more unprepared for what will be happening in the coming months.
The Biden administration says the majority of migrants are being turned away at the border and refuse to describe the situation as a crisis.
Refuse to describe the situation as a crisis. Well, there are a couple of conflicting, competing bits of information here, and one of those that you got to consider as well is how many Democrats just want to shut down ICE altogether.
This is exactly what Joe Biden campaigned on. He said he was going to decrease enforcement at the border, and as president now, he has directed ICE to focus on prioritizing national security dangers and other sorts of arrests, but not to simply be arresting migrants because they're crossing the border. That helps explain why there's this drop in number. But again, you're having Biden here in the middle, feeling political pressure on both sides. You know, Abbott, Trump, other Republicans saying they're not doing enough enforcement at the border. But there are a lot of Democrats who are a part of Biden's coalition who would like to see ICE disbanded entirely, who would like to see this enforcement measures dropped completely. And so Biden right now is stuck in the middle here.
Biden's stuck in the middle, unable really to figure out where he's going to move forward. Republicans want him to use the word crisis. He's refusing to use the word crisis, even though there is one. Republicans, though, I think that playing the word game, say my name. Say the word crisis. There's a crisis. Describe what's happening at the border. The Biden administration is blaming the Trump team. Say, this is all Donald Trump's fault. It's all Trump's fault. Trump and border security. Donald Trump was the one building a wall, you idiots. And you didn't want him to build the wall. And now the border is being flooded, particularly with kids. And the best you can do is, well, there was a hurricane a year ago, and they're fleeing the hurricane that was a year ago. No, you people have been saying, come on over. Y'all, come on, we're open, ringing the dinner bell for illegal aliens to come into the country. And guess what? They heard, and they're coming, and you're doing nothing. Keep in mind, one of the groups that the Democrats are losing are Hispanic voters. You know what Hispanic voters don't like? Illegal aliens. Do you know why? Because they took the time to come into this country legally. And they don't really like the people just trying to sneak across the border. At least they don't like that they're getting away with it and getting U.S. citizenship when these people stood in lines and did what it took to get legal citizenship. They don't like it. And the Democrats deny that basic fact. It shows up all the time in polling. And yet they refuse to admit it. That's one of the crises the Democrats are going to have to deal with, is their willful denial of reality, including on the COVID package.
There's not my truth or your truth. There is only...
I want to notice, I want to point out a trend to you. I noticed this was a wake up call. I really shouldn't go into the details on all of this, but there's a relevant point that I can go into. Have y'all noticed this trend? And I don't know when it started, but it hasn't been that long ago. People who have decided to be defined by their trauma in life. I don't think that's healthy, and I guess it's one of the reasons we're seeing this rise of victimhood around the world, that we are defined by our trauma. I was thinking about this morning, where I saw someone I interact with announcing some odd life choices, essentially moving into a throuple. That is a three-person couple, a throuple. and essentially justifying it based on being defined by some trauma. And I see this more and more. This is not healthy in society when people, instead of overcoming their trauma, decide they're going to just become permanent victims and says, well, I was traumatized when I was in an airplane crash when I was a kid. I still get on airplanes and I don't identify as an airplane. Maybe I should. I mean, I want to identify as what was the old war blog? Oh gosh, I loved it. Y'all, I gotta now. This is stuck in my head, and the only way to get it out. Yes, and it comes up when you put in identify. I love this. I identify as an A10 warthog. Yep. This is one of the greatest pieces of literature that has ever been on the internet. It is. I sexually identify as an Duffel blog. That's what it is. I love Duffel blog. It is a fantastic website. The following is an opinion piece by Specialist Herbert Panzing, U.S. Army. The opinions expressed are not necessarily those of Duffel blog or the editors. I have found the strength to admit it. I was 12 years old when I realized that I'm not really a man at heart, but rather a 19-foot, 10.5-inch long Gatling gun strapped onto a 24,959-pound airframe. All my life has been a lie, and I'm setting it right today. I was designed to kill Soviet tanks. From now on, call me Warthog. That's my real name. I'm having plastic surgeons attached to GAU 8 30-millimeter rotary cannon, 1,200 pounds of titanium armor, and 2 General Electric TF-34 GE100 turbofan engines to my body. Sergeant Major Fairchild says I'm stupid and I can't be a jet, but I'm beautiful and I'm a GD jet. If the Army won't pay for me to get the surgery, I'm just going to bring in Code Pink and point out that Manning loser is getting hormones and he's in prison. So why shouldn't a perfectly well-adjusted and honorably serving soldier have the right to be who they truly are, a metal-killing machine? I'm so sick and tired of being oppressed. Now we A-10s are on Congress's chopping block. It's sickening to see all the white cisgender Nazis literally raping my people with their actions. It's one of the best pieces of literature ever to appear on the internet. And I see people now all the time who are like, oh, I was victimized when I was a fetus in the womb, and it now defines me, and I'm living my best life as a victim of whatever it is that my psychoanalyst told me in my dreams happened to me. This is not sustainable for a healthy society, and yet more and more people are doing it. That's really troubling. Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I don't know if y'all know this, but the polling shows Americans love the Biden stimulus plan. Nobody knows what's in it, but Americans sure do love it. That seems to be the takeaway. People seem to think that they're going to be getting more money than they actually are. They've revised down the people who are able to get the $1,400 check. A lot of people think they're going to get it, and now they're not unless they make $80,000 or less, as opposed to, I think it had been $140,000 or something like that. They've revised it down. Now, $80,000 to you and me may sound like a lot where we live, but that's not really middle class in places like Manhattan, really even Atlanta. In some parts of North Atlanta, the cost of living in Johns Creek and the like is more expensive, but in San Francisco, Miami, Chicago, places like that, you're screwing the middle class by doing that. Now, all of these things came together for CNN's Poppy Harlow, who got to be a closet conservative with some of the questions she asked. She played a clip of Liz Cheney pointing out how the middle class was going to suffer and that the money was going to so much non-COVID relief. And then she asked the Biden advisor about all this.
She's really worried that the amount you spend on this is going to result down the line in middle class tax increases. Can you guarantee the Biden administration is not going to raise taxes on the middle class?
So, I disagree with almost everything she said right there. And the president has been extremely firm and forthright about the following point. I've never heard him either publicly or privately say anything but the tax measures that he intends to propose do not hit families below $400,000 AGI, adjusted gross income. And that line in the sand is well above anybody's conception of the middle class. So,
so that's a guarantee?
On that point. This is what the president has consistently said. Another thing that I think, let me just say, another thing that, since you played the clip, give me a chance to respond to it. Another thing she said that I think is just patently wrong is this idea that there are all these measures in the bill that don't apply to the crisis. I mean, in fact, if you look at the targeting of the American Rescue Plan, I just saw some new numbers. 35% of the benefits go to the bottom quintile, or the bottom fifth, the poorest fifth of families. If you look at the bottom half, something like 60% of the benefits go to the bottom half. What part goes to the top 1% or the top 0.1%? 0% of the benefits go up there. So this is a much better targeted bill than she suggested, and the elements of it are all geared toward putting this virus behind us, launching a recovery, and meeting the needs of families and businesses, and doing so quickly.
So here's the thing. They can say that it helps the poor, but it doesn't necessarily help the poor. CBS and other outlets are running this poll that the American public just overwhelmingly loves the Biden plan. Listen to this. 3 in 4 Americans approve of Congress passing the economic relief package as it continues to draw wide support. Large majorities of Democrats and independents, along with nearly half of Republicans, approve of the package. Nobody knows what's in the package. Even this guy on TV talking to CNN doesn't know what's in the package, and he's one of the advisors. It does not overwhelmingly go to the poor. Certainly, they have adjusted the criteria for who gets the $1,400 checks down from excluding the upper middle class so that the poor will get the money, but there's only a limited define. You're only going to get a fixed check. They're not giving you more money because they excluded the upper middle class. The money is going to go to fungible items where budgetary resources can be moved around. So, for example, they added a line in the budget or in the spending plan that says you can't spend the money on pensions because one of the Republican complaints was that the money would go to bail out pensions in states like New York that negotiated badly with labor unions. So now the money can't go for pensions. So here's what's going to happen. is this money will go to cover the standard line items of a budget, so that the standard line items of the budget will go into the pension. All you're doing is money is fungible. You moving it around. You can't pay for X, but you can pay for Y. So all the money you're already paying for Y is going to go to X, and this new money is going to go to Y. That's what's happening. They are going to bail out pensions with it. What they've also decided, though, is you can't get a tax cut. Now, here's the interesting thing. In Georgia, there was already a plan to cut taxes. Why? Because income is up 42% in the state for the revenue, or I should say, to the state is up 42%. We're actually doing better than we were pre-pandemic. The economy in Georgia came back sooner. A lot of companies moved business over to Georgia since we opened up first so that they could get back going. It has benefited Georgia. So the Georgia government, already passed by the Georgia House, was a tax cut. Well, now it turns out there's language in the COVID plan that says you can't do that. You can't cut taxes anymore. The Wall Street Journal actually has a big piece on this today, that you're not able to cut taxes in the COVID plan. It's a bunch of garbage, and it's possibly unconstitutional. The question is, if you go before the Supreme Court, what will the Supreme Court do? It's really problematic that this is where we're headed with the Democrats and their big spending plan. Let me read you part of the Wall Street Journal editorial. Democrats on Wednesday passed their $1.9 trillion spending and welfare bill that would have been unimaginable even in the Obama years. And the big news is not exactly that they did it. The party is united behind the most left-wing agenda in decades, and Republicans divided in intellectual disarray. This is only the beginning of the progressive steamroller, and it's worth understanding why. One lesson from the COVID non-fight is that there are no Democratic moderates in Congress. The party base has moved so sharply left that even swing state members are more liberal than many liberals in the Clinton years. Democrats lost not a single vote in the Senate and not only one in the House. The fear of primary challenges from the left, which took out House war horses in 2018 and 20, is concentrated incumbent minds. A second lesson is that Joe Biden is no longer moderating as a political force. Democrats in the House and Senate are setting the agenda, and Mr. Biden is along for the ride. He's the ideal political frontman for this agenda with his talk of unity and anti-Trump persona, but he isn't shaping legislation. He's signing on whatever Chief of Staff Ron Klain tells him he needs to support. For now, at least, there also isn't much of an opposition. With a few exceptions, the media are marching in lockstep support for whatever Democrats want. The substance of the COVID bill was barely covered outside the Wall Street Journal. Opposition to H.R. 1, the federal takeover of state election laws, is literally reported as a revival of Jim Crow racism. The business community has also been co-opted, as is often at the beginning of Democratic presidencies. Industries are trying to protect their specific iron rice bowls, but one price is their accommodation with the larger progressive agenda. Small businesses opposed to the $15 an hour minimum wage. Bigger businesses don't mind saddling smaller competitors with higher costs. Big oil doesn't mind selling out independent frackers on climate rules. And on it goes. And one of the key tenets here in this bill is that you must be prohibited as a state from raising taxes. That will hurt Georgia. Georgia, the Democrats are saying, oh, Georgia's getting $4 billion. Atlanta's going to get money. DeKalb County is going to get money. Lots of progressive enclaves of the state are going to get money. The problem is the state can't cut taxes. The state was doing well economically, and if we're going to brag about the $4 billion Georgia's getting less than it would have under the original formula because the Democrats decided to reward the states that stayed locked down and hurt their economies and punish the states that opened up and had their economies rebound. So Georgia is not getting as much as it would have gotten under the old formulary, in the same way that the upper middle class is not getting money. All those people who voted for Joe Biden in the Atlanta suburbs and wanted their $1,400 or $2,000 check were given a big middle finger by the Democrats. But everybody loves it. Now, here's why. Everyone loves legislation because they don't know what's in it. And the media calls them, and the media says, aren't you glad that the Democrats have decided to bail out the middle class? They say, well, I'm in the middle class. Yes, I love that Congress is giving me rich people's money. They don't actually tell them that they're the ones who are considered rich and it's their money going to bail out people lower on the economic totem pole than they are. Everybody loves it. Nobody knows what's in it. This reminds me, yes, it is that time. You knew it was coming. I love playing this clip from Yes, Prime Minister. When you hear a poll on public policy, don't ever believe the poll on public policy. You know, polls on candidates who you're going to vote for they're not great these days, but they're better than polls on public policy. Why? Let me play this clip, and this explains to you why you should never believe a poll that says public policy is somebody supports X, Y, and Z public policy.
He's going to say something new and radical in the broadcast.
What, that silly grand design? Bernard, that was precisely what you had to avoid. How did this come about? I shall need a very good explanation.
Well, he's very keen on it.
What's that got to do with it? Things don't happen just because prime ministers are very keen on them. Neville Chamberlain was very keen on peace.
Yes, he thinks it's a vote winner.
Ah, that's more serious. Sit down. What makes him think that?
Well, the party have had an opinion poll done. It seems all the voters are in favour of bringing back national service.
Well, have another opinion poll done showing the voters are against bringing back national service.
We can't be for it and against.
Of course they can, Bernard. Have you ever been surveyed?
Yes. Well, not me, actually. My house. Oh, I see what you mean.
Well, Bernard, you know what happens. Nice young lady comes up to you. Obviously, you want to create a good impression. You don't want to look a fool, do you?
No.
No. So she starts asking you some questions. Mr. Woolley, are you worried about the number of young people without jobs?
Yes.
Are you worried about the rise in crime among teenagers?
Yes.
Do you think there's a lack of discipline in our comprehensive schools?
Yes.
Do you think young people welcome some authority and leadership in their lives?
Yes.
Do you think they respond to a challenge?
Yes.
Would you be in favour of reintroducing national service?
Yes. Oh, well, I suppose I might.
Yes or no?
Yes.
Of course you would, Bernard. After all you've told you can't say no to that. So, they don't mention the first 5 questions and they publish the last one.
Is that really what they do?
Well, not the reputable ones, no, but there aren't many of those. So, alternatively, the young lady can get the opposite result.
How?
Mr. Woolley, are you worried about the danger of war?
Yes.
Are you worried about the growth of armaments?
Yes.
Do you think there's a danger in giving young people guns and teaching them how to kill?
Yes.
Do you think it's wrong to force people to take up arms against their will?
Yes.
Would you oppose the reintroduction of national service?
Yes.
There you are, you see, Bernard. The perfect balanced sample. So, we just commissioned our own survey for the Ministry of Defence. See to it, Bernard.
You understand how it works now? Don't buy into the public policy. Listen, if we all fell for the polls, Obamacare never polled well. And it turns out that polling was right. And we know because of what happened to the Democrats in 2010, devastating losses. But the bottom line here is that the American public doesn't know what's in the COVID relief package. They all think they're getting a lot of money. Less people are getting money now than when Trump was president. And major blue states that handled themselves poorly during COVID are getting bailed out, while the states that opened and got their economies going are getting punished. John Ossoff and Raphael Warnock are dropping numbers. Oh, Georgia's getting billions. Yeah, but they could be getting more. Thanks to you guys, they're not. They're getting punished for reopening. Individual Georgians who Raphael Warnock and John Ossoff said we're going to turn your vote into a check. They're not getting the check now because they reduced the standards or increased the tightened who can get it. This is what's happening. People don't understand it. When you get your check from the federal government, it's going to be less than what they promised you if you get one at all. They lied to you. But here's the larger problem. Let's say you get everything. Let's say you get every penny you think you're going to get. And all the states get bailed out. The problem as well is that inflation is coming. And the Biden administration was warned that if they went with $1.9 trillion, they were going to cause inflation. The Republicans, one of the reasons they voted against it is they said it was too big, would put too much money into the economy, and would rev up the economy so much that it would cause inflation and things would be hurt. And the Democrats said, oh, no, the Democrats trotted out a bunch of progressives said, inflation is an outdated concept that doesn't matter anymore. We're not going to get inflation. You people, y'all are just tightwads now that you're not in power. No, there are lots of warning signs that inflation is coming. It's going to hurt the economy. It's going to drive up the costs of doing business. It's going to drive up the national debt. It's going to force a middle-class tax increase. One of the concerns Republicans are talking about is taxes are going to have to go up as inflation goes up because the interest on the national debt is going to overwhelm us. It's going to happen. More likely than not, at least. Got to hedge your bets here. Maybe it won't. Maybe it won't. But it looks like it will. And it was major Democratic economists who were the first ones to point it out. And now they've been silenced. And you know, and I know darn well, when the inflation happens, the Democrats will blame the Republicans.
He doesn't just have a radio show. Eric has a...
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is what? 877-97-ERIC. 877-973-7425. How is it not Friday yet? And I missed Monday because I was sick. I'm ready for it. So I'm leaving. I'm running away from home. Everybody's making me leave. Well, look, I realized I was gone last Friday, fly fishing. So I am going to, I'm going to be here tomorrow. I promise you, I will be here tomorrow with you. But for reasons we will get into at a later date, I am going to be gone next week. One of the things I am doing next week is I'm going to the Mojave Desert to shoot guns. I couldn't say no. So I'm going to go shoot guns, big guns, really, really big guns. And it's going to be glorious. Now, Democrats in Georgia are really upset that you people will have to show your ID or provide your driver's license number to get an absentee ballot. They don't like the fact you're going to have to provide a driver's license number or an ID number to get your voter to get your absentee ballot. They don't like it. They claim it's voter suppression to do what you got to do at the polls, even though a majority of black Democrats support photo ID. In New York City, if you want to go get your COVID vaccine in New York, you've got to provide a driver's license, passport, or other proof of residency. Isn't that vaccine suppression? Isn't it vaccine suppression? You want everybody to get it. Well, in New York, you got to prove your residency requirements. You got to prove residency to get the vaccine. Now, here's the thing. In Georgia, you can come in from out of state and get your vaccine. But in New York, you got to show proof of residency. Why proof of residency? Why do we have to do that? This is if it's voter suppression to show your ID to vote, then it's vaccine suppression to show your ID to get the vaccine. Aren't you supposed to be in it for everybody? Getting rid of the vaccine, getting rid of the virus, give everybody the vaccine. But nope, not in New York. Now, to the phones we go. JD in Fayetteville, you're going to be first today. Welcome.
Good morning, Eric. Thank you. One simple question. With all the cuts that were made to the tax bill, stimulus bill, how come it's still $1.9 trillion? Where'd all the savings go?
Down a toilet, I guess. Up Joe Biden's backside, maybe.
$1.9 trillion.
Yeah, look, $1.9 trillion. There's no savings. They didn't save anything. $1.9 trillion is absurd. And yet there we go. 1.9 trillion. Can you all fathom $1.9 trillion? That's an obscene amount of money. And the shameful thing here, honestly, is that the Republican packages weren't great either, but they weren't even as bad as this. This is part of the problem with Republicans, of course, is that Republicans decide to spend just not quite as much as the Democrats, but they're okay with the spending. That's just, it's deeply disturbing, frankly. Deeply disturbing to think about what's going to come out of this. See, just so you understand the concept, when the government doesn't have this money, so they're going to have to print this money. It's going to hurt the currency. And then as the money floods into the economy, people are going to be buying stuff up. And as they buy stuff up, you're going to have to increase wages to attract new workers or pay more people to produce the stuff to replenish the shelves, which is going to drive up the cost of the stuff on the shelves. As people get the stuff scarcity, they're going to raise the prices more to prevent people from buying as much. It's called inflation. Inflation's going to happen. We're seeing a maxed out housing market. We're seeing inflation on the horizon. This winds up hurting the economy. All the people said, oh, the good times are coming. 15. They're going to be short-lived with a $1.9 trillion spending package roaring the economy into overheating. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. I am so glad to have you with me. This hour of the program is sponsored by First Liberty Building and Loan in Noonan, Georgia. If you need access to capital, credits, you need money for your business, and we're talking six figures and up, check them out, firstlibertyga.com. I am so thankful to them sponsoring the program. Firstlibertyga.com is the website. For businesses, not individuals, they're great. Now, I've put it off. I have put it off, and we gotta talk about this. This isn't a subject I want to talk about. It's a subject we need to talk about, and particularly just how normalizing so much of the conversations are these days on stuff like this. Let me read you this. This is from CNN, and it came out over the weekend, and I missed it. Well, actually, it's not that I missed it. It's that I've avoided it. This is by Faith Karimi. Meet Ian Jenkins and his partner, Alan, and their partner, Jeremy. They're a throuple, a committed polyamorous relationship involving three people. And after a complicated and expensive court battle to all become legal parents, the trio are raising two toddlers in Southern California and proving how families come in all forms. They're part of a unique and very modern family that includes three dads, two surrogates, and one egg donor. In a new book, Three Dads and a Baby, Jenkins chronicles their search for potential egg donors and a surrogate, and a fight to change a medical and legal system geared towards heterosexual couples. The three men have all been together for more than 8 years. Jenkins says they fought to get all three of their names listed on the birth certificates to protect their parental rights and the rights of their children. The process was emotionally grueling, but we are hopeful that other people benefit from the experience we had, he told CNN, and that it's easier, less expensive, and less stressful for them. As a gay teenager in Virginia, Jenkins says he faced death threats after coming out and couldn't imagine he'd ever be able to openly love another man. I was completely isolated. I didn't know a single gay person when I was in high school, he says. I thought I'd never be able to live an authentic life. It never occurred to me that people could even have two partners. He met Alan while they were doing their medical residencies in Boston. He was smarter than the other students. It was obvious, even though he wasn't straight, to show off his medical knowledge, like half of them were, Jenkins said. He was drawn to Alan's calm demeanor, witty comebacks, and compassion for his patients. In his book, Jenkins recalls being touched by Alan's tender care of a frail old woman who had been hospitalized. He nicknamed her My Golden Girl. Their first date was in 2003. Jenkins went to Alan's place with a baking stone, homemade pizza dough, and wine, and made him dinner. The couple later decided Boston was too chilly and agreed to move to warmer weather. They ended in San Diego, where Jenkins is an associate professor of medicine at UC San Diego, and Alan works at a hospital as a psychiatrist. Turns out the medical center that's the furthest from Boston in the continental U.S. is San Diego. So here we are. And after almost a decade together, Jenkins introduced to Alan the idea of bringing a third man into their partnership. They met Jeremy online, and he joined them in 2012. Jeremy works in animal medicine at the San Diego Zoo, where his patients range from apes to California condors. To protect their privacy, they preferred not to use their real name. Okay, they put up their picture on CNN. Y'all, when conservatives who didn't support the progressive agenda on secular sexual issues said that this would happen, they were told they were fear-mongering, that this was not true, it would never happen, and guess what? It has happened. Turns out this is a repeated pattern. Every time the conservatives say something like this is going to happen, the left says, no, you hateful bigots, it's not going to happen. And then it happens, and we're all supposed to be happy about it. I mean, I read you the CNN story without changing it, so you can see just how uplifting, upbeat, and positive it is. We should all be encouraging this. I would like to explain to you the concept of the democracy of the dead. G.K. Chesterton, Catholic philosopher, theologian, brilliant writer, he popularized the idea of the democracy of the dead. And it's something that I have come back to repeatedly over the years. And he's got, it's a great quote. Tradition is the democracy of the dead. It means giving a vote to the most obscure of all classes, our ancestors. He writes it in Orthodoxy. And it's something that I think people, well, they're dismissive of, but it actually makes a lot of sense. And essentially what Chesterton's point was, is that the way we do things now, oftentimes, they come through trial and error. For example, scripturally, biblically, if we follow along with that, God made man and then made women to complement the role of men, complementarianism, it's in the Bible. And a man and a woman are supposed to raise their children together. Now, where it goes wrong in the Bible is polygamy. It's always, you get into, David and Bathsheba, all that. Yeah, look at all the problems you get out of it. And yet we've come full circle. Now, here's the issue. This gets into the democracy of the dead. Through trial and error over thousands of years, we figured out that the best way to raise children is not a village, but a family. And the best way to raise the children in that family is to have a mother and a father in the house. And in fact, we see in society right now, though we are all elevate the single parents, and we are all in awe of single parents, we are all impressed with the abilities of single parents. It turns out a two-parent nuclear household, heterosexual, is still the most stable environment for children. And a two-parent heterosexual nuclear household that actually becomes an extended family where potentially the grandparents live nearby, the other family lives nearby, is even more stabilizing and inclusive for children's well-being. We didn't just get here because God said so. Because God said so, and everyone else said, well, what do you know? You're just God. And people experimented over a very long period of time with ways to raise children. And virtually every society settled on, you need one mom and one dad and have kids. It's not bigotry to say so. And a lot of people decide, well, we know best, and we're going to normalize all sorts of other ways to raise kids. And it's all about themselves. Now, this doesn't end well for society. And what an odd thing in this, almost passed over. A decade in our relationship, the guy's like, hey, maybe we need another dude in our relationship. What happens a decade later when the young guy in the relationship says, I think we need a fourth one in the relationship? Do we just keep adding over time? What happens there? When I was a kid, I always learned you had even numbered kids come over to the house. You don't have because if you have two kids come over and there are three of you, there's always an odd man out. Two's company, three's a crowd. You kind of learn this in life. That the media is complicit in advancing past the norms of society into destabilizing society can't be in doubt. And it's not judging to point out that take Christian morality, Muslim morality, religious morality out of it. Just focus on the tradition of the dead, the democracy of the dead, the traditions and cultural norms that have been established over thousands of years. This rapid advance to upend those traditional stabilizing influences in society doesn't get us to a better place. It never has gotten us to a better place. It never will get us to a better place. And that if you say that, you're the bad person and you're the one who needs to be canceled. That's part of the problem here. Anyone who points out this isn't normal is, well, you're judging. The number of people who take the Lord's name in vain is outmatched by the number of people who take thou shalt not judge out of context. You know, immediately after Jesus says don't judge, he says don't throw pearls to swine. That's a judgment call. Who are the swine? In fact, later he says to use true judgment. He says to judge. In fact, Paul writes in Corinthians, you got to judge in the church what is good and what isn't. It's remarkable the number of people who say, if you say, here's a standard by which we should live because all of the objective data shows this is stabilizing for society. So, well, you're judging me. No, I'm telling you how you destabilize society is what you're doing. And the media being complicit in it. It's amazing. But here we are. This rise, you know, they told us a decade ago, this will never happen. This will never, you're hysterical. It's not true. It's not going to happen. And now here we are. And they'll tell you you're a bigot if you say otherwise. Calling people bigots has become what they do. You know, at the bottom of the hour, Ryan Anderson is going to join me. He works for the Ethics and Public Policy Center in Washington, D.C., just became their president. He was at the Heritage Foundation. He has a book that was on Amazon, and it's When Harry Became Sally. It is an academic book on transgenderism. It's been banned. The wokes at Amazon have banned his book, even though it was well-received, highly regarded, academic, not pejorative, not mean, not nasty. But Amazon banned it anyway because it actually undermines so many of the arguments with the rise of the wokes and transgenderism in society. You can't buy it from Amazon. Walmart is now taken to canceling people's orders when they order his book. So I decided to have him on the show. Let's see if they cancel me. But I will ask him about this topic as well. Great guy. Y'all will, if you haven't ever heard Ryan Anderson, you will at the bottom of the hour. Dan Crenshaw is going to join me in the next hour as well.
You're listening to the Erick Erickson Show, the perfect blend of
Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. You can call in and be a part of the program, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I am so happy to have Omaha Steaks as a sponsor here. You know, growing up listening to talk radio, I heard Omaha Steaks. I get his Rush or Sean one, and I started ordering Omaha Steaks, and I've never had a bad experience with them. In fact, I'll tell you one experience I had. I had a friend of mine in Macon who passed away a couple of years ago, Tom Wagner, wonderful guy, and he would send us Omaha Steaks every year. And we had moved, and he sent it to our old house, and I went over there, and there was this package. I could smell it before I saw what it was, and it had probably been sitting there for a couple of weeks. The label it had to have been there a couple of weeks because the label was decomposed essentially from all the rain we had. Couldn't figure out who had sent it to us. I kind of suspected him, wasn't sure, but I was able to call Omaha Steaks and explain to them what happened. Not only did they send me a whole new package to our new address, but they told me who had sent it so I could send a thank you note. It was wonderful customer service, and I hear great stories about their customer service all the time. I also hear great stories about the quality of their meat, and I know it's true because I get a lot of stuff from them regularly. They age their beef at least 21 days. That's where the magic happens, the flavor. You get that really great beef flavor. Right now, if you go to omahasteaks.com and you put Georgia in the search bar, yes, Georgia, the name of our state, put Georgia in the search bar, you'll see the butcher's bestseller. You're going to get their butcher cut fillets. You'll get burgers. You'll get pork chops. You'll get kielbasa sausage. You'll get caramel apple tartlets. My wife really loves them. They're individually wrapped. They don't have nutmeg in them, which she can't eat. And you get sides. It's a great package. If you go right now and you put Georgia in the search bar at omahasteaks.com, you'll get this package. You're also going to get 4 more chicken breasts for free and 4 burgers for free. Their burgers, by the way, they're not like your standard ground chuck that shrink up on the grill. These are premium blend. They're great, very flavorful. I make smash burger. I got a Blackstone, make smash burgers with them. Really good quality stuff. You can't go to the grocery store and get all of this stuff at the price you'll get it from Omaha Steaks, nor will you get the quality. It's one of the tricks of the trade of Omaha Steaks. They have mastered the supply chain and the quality. So go to omahasteaks.com today, put Georgia in the search bar, get the Butcher's Bestsellers pack, get those 4 free chicken breasts, 4 burgers as well, for free at omahasteaks.com, Georgia in the search bar. Y'all, just randomly as an aside, I don't want to go on a large advertiser riff here, but I love this company. They're good people. The product is great, and I'm delighted to have them here. And frankly, if you appreciate this program, a great way to help us is to go order from a place like Omaha Steaks for support our advertisers. That then brings us other advertisers. The word gets out that you guys are engaged, and you can't beat the quality you're going to get from them. They're good stuff and a great price. And I thank them for doing it. Now, you need to know something. The President of the United States, former President of the United States, Donald Trump, wants Herschel Walker to run for Senate. That, to me, that suggests that Doug Collins is not a contender. It suggests to me that Doug Collins is not going to run if Herschel Walker gets in, particularly given the fact that you've got Donald Trump out there releasing a statement saying he wants Herschel Walker. If, honest to goodness, if that's the case, there's no point in Loeffler or Collins or anyone else running if the president is trying to unify people around Herschel Walker. Now, I don't know that it's actually going to happen. I don't know that he'll be able to get Herschel Walker to do it. I think Herschel Walker doesn't live in the state anymore, and they're going to have to get him to come back. There's a rumor afoot that he may be moving. Wouldn't it be fantastic if the legendary Herschel Walker ran for the United States Senate in Georgia? He said in a statement released by his PAC, he would be unstoppable, just like he was when he played for the Georgia Bulldogs and in the NFL. He is also a great person. Run, Herschel, run. Run, Forrest, run. Run, Herschel, run. He's going to do it. They've known each other for a long time, too. And I think maybe this induces him to do it. It would certainly curtail a large field. Now, there is something here that you need to understand. and I want to be real honest with you. Don't hate me for saying it. I don't think the field necessarily should be cleared for Herschel Walker. And that's not to disparage him. Just bear with me here. Herschel Walker is a good dude who would make a great candidate. But you know what makes a greater candidate, a better candidate? A primary. Where any baggage can come out and be dealt with in the primary. You learn on your feet in the primary. You get better on the campaign stage in a primary. Having a primary helps candidates. When you clear fields, clearing fields tends to actually hurt the candidate for whom the field was cleared because it undermines their abilities to improve themselves before the general election. So you're thrust into a general election campaign with an experienced politician like Raphael Warnock, and you're kind of caught flat-footed, and oftentimes surrounded by a bunch of consultants who just want to get rich off of you. I would be very, very careful about completely clearing the field for Herschel Walker. Now, I think he'd be a great candidate. It'd be super intriguing to me to see him run, but I just we gotta be mindful that sometimes when you clear the field for a candidate, particularly a candidate, a celebrity candidate, the celebrity candidate doesn't do well because it let's just be honest here. I ran for office. I ran other people for office. It takes a level of skill set none of us really possess. You got to learn some stuff on the campaign trail to get some political judgment. And the celebrities in the bubble is one of the more difficult issues to deal with. And my goodness gracious, I think he'd be great. But, to a degree, it's like the Kelly Loeffler situation. I thought she was a good candidate. She beat Doug Collins in what amounted to a primary, but she was still very stiff on the stage. She was very stiff out on the campaign trail. And it takes some level of getting comfortable. It takes some level of improving. And if you clear the field, the candidate has no incentive to improve. That's a problem. When we come back, so Dan Crenshaw is going to join me in the next hour to talk about what's going on in Congress and the stimulus package. But my buddy Ryan Anderson is going to join me in the next half hour. Amazon has banned his book
15
for an academic discourse. It's an academic discourse on transgenderism, and they don't want you to be able to buy it from anybody on Amazon's platform. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here, the Erick Erickson Show, all over the place. The phone number, if you want to be a part of it, 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. You can go to ewerickson.com every day. That recipe will come out, I promise. It got held up, and I'm using a new email system, and it crashed, apparently. But nonetheless, we must move on to important matters. There is a book out, When Harry Became Sally. I got a copy of it when it first came out. Responding to the Transgender Moment is the subtitle. It is by my friend Ryan Anderson, and you cannot buy this book at Amazon.com. For reasons that Amazon will not explain, they have stopped it. And, you know, there's other news related to Ryan, and he's got a new job I wanted to talk to him about. So I thought, why don't we get him on the show? And he can convert me to Catholicism. Ryan, how are you?
I'm doing well, and always happy to have that conversation.
Look, I was writing about Martin Luther last night, so maybe not today, but I want to I'll get to your book, but I heard the news. Our mutual friend Andrew Walker emailed or texted me and said, I wanted you to know this was coming, and I was so excited because I don't want to make this sound critical of the Ethics and Public Policy Center, but I've thought for a while, here's an organization that is in the moment perfectly, could probably use a little bit younger leadership, and suddenly here you are taking over it. It's just the man in the arena at a perfect moment in time, and want to let you discuss with the audience what exactly the Ethics and Public Policy Center is and does.
Sure. Well, first, thank you. I appreciate that. That's very complimentary. I mean, more or less, EPPC was founded in the bicentenary year of our nation, so 1976. It's explicitly pro-Bible and pro-America, right? Two things that I'm in favor of, right? It's explicitly a Judeo-Christian think tank that wants to draw from the Judeo-Christian theological tradition to help support the American political tradition. Ed Whalen has been was our president for the past 17 years. He did heroic work, getting every good judicial nominee successfully confirmed during that time. I mean, he was at the forefront of so many of those confirmation battles. He's now in his 60s, and he thought, you know, I've been president for 17 years. I just want to be a senior fellow again. Let me recruit, you know, my successor. And so the credit goes to Ed for having the foresight to say it's time to pass the baton. It's time to get someone from that next generation. You know, a lot of leaders want to hold on well past their prime. Like, that's not Ed. Ed's a very generous guy. And so as a result, we now have the opportunity here to really take, you know, a 40-something-year-old institution that's had a lot of success and just take it to that next level, bringing on board someone like Andrew Walker, bringing on board Roger Severino, the former director of civil rights at HHS during the Trump years, who undid all of the bad stuff that the Obama people did on civil rights in the healthcare department. Like, he's now one of our senior fellows leading the HHS Accountability Project at EPPC. So it's really exciting because a lot's going to be going on to make sure that people of faith, of Orthodox biblical faith, have a voice in D.C. on all of these important policy issues.
Well, and again, you know, Ed really, I think, does deserve a lot of credit here because he and I have both lamented in the past how you oftentimes in Washington see this set up among a lot of think tanks and organizations where donors pour money in, build a group up, and it's so defined by the head of the organization. When he goes away, the whole thing collapses. And his leadership in wanting to oversee a transition to preserve the organization, I think, has been so commendable of him along the way. And he's a great guy, too. He's one of my favorite people to follow online. Now,
without a doubt. I mean, if you want to stay up to date on the court, there's no one better to follow than Ed's blogging at Bench Memos at NRO and then his Twitter feed.
Yeah.
Just, you know, if you want to know what's going on from a conservative jurisprudential perspective, Ed's the man.
Yeah, very much so. Now, let's turn to the issue at hand here with your book, When Harry Became Sally. I actually bought my copy from Amazon, and now you can't. And have they told you anything about why?
Not really. The only thing they'll say to the publisher, the only thing they'll say to members of the Senate who have asked, the only thing they'll say to members of Congress who have asked is that it violates their content policy, which is surprising because it didn't violate their content policy for 3 years. Right. They sold thousands of copies of this book for 3 years. And only now, after Trump has left office, after Attorney General Barr has left office, after Josh Hawley is no longer in the majority party in the Senate, and the very same week that Nancy Pelosi scheduled the Equality Act for a vote in the House. Only now does the book violate the content policy. And there's been no explanation, no specification of which aspect of the content policy does it violate, and no specification of like what page of the book commits the violation. Right? So we have no idea what's wrong with the book. There's just a lack of transparency. We filed an appeal, but we haven't even gotten a response on our appeal. Right? So it's like, who knows? It's a black box.
Yeah, really, that's one of the most disturbing parts here is that they never do share the actual reason, and it sure seems to be awfully suspicious given that they were perfectly fine for a number of years. I mean, when it came out, I think I got a galley copy of it, but then I ordered a copy as well just because I wanted to support the effort and the research of the book, and no problem, next day delivery from Amazon, and now you can't. And I guess that gets to one of the bigger topics here is one of the things we're really beginning to see in the country, particularly with the transgender movement, is a real censoriousness of we're not allowed to have the conversation, we just must accept. And I don't know that that's going to get them very far in life, shutting people down and intimidating people.
I think that's exactly right, because so the reality about this book is that it's not a bomb-throwing book, it's not a name-calling book. This is like a Robbie George style book.
Right.
Robbie was a mentor of mine from when I was an undergrad at Princeton. It's argued compassionately. It cites all the most rigorous academic sources imaginable, and yet it is still unacceptable to Amazon, which makes people think that it's not about how you say it, it's not about how rigorously you argue it. It's that they just disagree with what you're saying. And the problem for Amazon is that, the vast majority of people agree with me on this issue. And not just social conservatives, not just religious individuals. There are lots of card-carrying Democrats, like lefty Bernie Sanders supporters, who think it's deeply problematic that Big Pharma is, using puberty-blocking drugs to block kids from going through natural biological puberty. Right? Lots of progressive liberal feminists think it's deeply problematic that high school girls are losing championship track races to boys who identify as girls. So this isn't a partisan issue. It's not a religious issue. It's almost like a common sense issue. And Amazon set itself up on the wrong side of common sense, which is why I think you've seen so many people express concern over this.
Well, and there seems to be almost, I've been referring to the social justice woke set lately as Woko Haram, given some of their tactics and intimidation, threats and bullying. And it seems like so much of corporate America right now has bought into that agenda, the woke agenda, if you will, where anyone who's on the outside saying, wait a second, this doesn't make sense, corporate America kind of either tunes them out or censors them. And I don't know whether they've actually bought into it or they're just scared of having coming under fire.
My sense is that it's a combination of both, right? So some of the people there, and I would say, the people in like the human resources, personnel department, media department, they're true believers. Like they've bought into this. They graduated with gender studies degrees, stuff like that. And then I think some of the corporate execs, the people who are more concerned with bottom line, they're afraid, right? They're afraid that if they don't give in to the ideological demand, then who knows what happens, right? I actually think it's a bad business decision. After Target made the decision to have transgender friendly fitting room policies, the Target stock tanked. People issued boycotts. It was a bad business decision for Target. But I think it's a combination of there's some true believers there, and then there are also some kind of corporate execs who are afraid of standing up to the true believers. And you see this playing out in newspapers all the time, right? I mean, look at what's happening at the New York Times and at the Atlantic, right? Other kind of prominent journalism outfits where you have like a younger generation of true believers forcing out someone like Andrew Sullivan, right? From New York Magazine, because the execs don't quite have the backbone to stand up to them.
Yeah, they really don't. But I gotta, man, I could talk to you a while for this issue, and we got limited time here, but let me ask you this. There seems to have been in just the last year or so, and people talk about social contagion, something that you read stories, for example, the school in Great Britain of autistic kids where someone decided to transition and suddenly an overwhelming number of the kids in the school decide they're transgender as well. There just seems to be something in culture right now that is playing itself out where kids, particularly Gen Z, I guess they call it, that we're in a postmodern era where they got to try things out for themselves. They can't just accept stuff as fact. And there's just this weird phenomenon now of people suddenly saying, oh, maybe I'm transgender when probably they're not. And how do you articulate these issues of what's going on in culture right now?
Oh, that is such a hugely important insight you just made, Eric. And you're not alone in pointing this out. Lefty professors have pointed this out. So in the U.S., Lisa Littman, a professor at Brown University, was one of the first to suggest, wait a minute, something new is going on here. The term she coined was rapid onset gender dysphoria, where, a high school or college-age girl with no history of gender struggles all of a sudden announces, she's a trans boy or gender fluid or, non-binary, and then a whole host of other people within her social circles make similar announcements. And, what you refer to as social contagion is that type of idea. It's not like a physical contagion the way that, like COVID is a physical contagion, but it's something in the culture, something in the society. So there's a social spread of this. Just last week, the Dutch doctor who pioneered the puberty blocking regime said, wait a minute, like what we started doing a decade ago shouldn't be uncritically applied all across the globe. And he was expressing concern, this is now happening all across the globe. And we have to think through this because we're seeing a new form of gender dysphoria take place. Abigail Schreier's written a great book highlighting just like the personal stories and testimonies and evidence of, what's a 4,400% increase in the United Kingdom of teenage and 20-something girls presenting as boys and seeking testosterone and surgery. And we got to pump the brakes, right? We can't rush into this and say, yes, like the problems with your body and therefore the solution is testosterone and surgery. It's, to my mind, not a surprise that this is happening at the same time as the Me Too movement. What both of these suggest is that our culture is deeply inhospitable to girls and women. And it's not surprising to me that at the same time that we have lots of women coming out with stories of how they've been sexually harassed and physically abused in a variety of ways, other women are, fleeing from their own femininity, their own womanhood. Right? Our culture isn't getting what it means to be a man and a woman correct, and it's manifesting itself in a variety of ways.
Yeah, I'm alarmed at the trend. But before you came on, I was talking with my audience about Chesterton's idea of the democracy of the dead, and society sorts itself out over thousands of years, and suddenly along comes the 21st century, and like, maybe we've been doing it wrong for 6,000 years of humanity, and should rush headlong into something else. And I don't think that's a stable way to keep society going.
Definitely not. And, it was John Paul II. So I'm going to give you a Catholic quote here.
He's one of my favorites.
In the middle of the last century, he said, look, the problem of the 20th century was the problem of faulty humanism. We thought that by getting rid of God, we'd be elevating man. And in reality, by getting rid of God, we're debasing and degrading man. And, he pointed to the 2 world wars, the Holocaust, totalitarian regimes. He then extended that analysis with abortion. And I think we can now extend that with redefining marriage and now even redefining what it is to be a man or woman. We're discarding basic truths from the very first page of Genesis, right? That we're made in the image and likeness of God, that we're created male and female, and that male and female are created for each other. And a society that rejects such basic truths isn't going to be a healthy, flourishing society for much longer, right? And so this is why there's an important emphasis that we get this right. Because in the meantime, there are people who are suffering, and they're not getting the healing and the care that they deserve.
Very well said. Ryan, listen, where can people go to learn more about you and the Ethics and Public Policy Center?
Sure. The website is eppc.org, so eppc.org. You can learn more about me, learn more about my colleagues at EPPC. And then if you do want to buy the book, Don't go to Amazon because it's not there. Go directly to the publisher. Cut out the middleman. This is a way for the publishers to actually make some money on this and for Amazon to take a hit on the pocketbook. It's encounterbooks.com. Encounter publishes lots of good conservative books, and they would appreciate your support.
Well, yeah, I was going to send people to Barnes & Noble to buy, but I will do a link there as well. I do this text thing where I encourage people to text, and I can send them back a link to buy it. I will readjust it from one to the other before I send it out and make sure people get the book. Listen, it is always good to talk to you. I am so happy that you are where you are right now. You're doing the Lord's work, and unfortunately, you're going to have to deal with Andrew Walker, which is God bless you for that one as well. There's a sainthood in there for you somewhere.
Thank you, Eric. Always a pleasure to chat with you.
Thanks. Take care. Ryan Anderson, Ethics Public Policy Center. Y'all, he is a phenomenal human being and probably the best spoken on this issue. And I will, you know what? Let me go on and tell you, if you text the word data to 33777, you can buy his, you really should buy his book. Do you have any interest in what's going on culturally at this moment right now? You should buy his book, When Harry Became Sally. Amazon does not want you to buy it, but if you text the word data to 33777, the link goes to Barnes & Noble right now. I'll update it in just a little bit so that it goes to Encounter Books directly. But great guy, phenomenal scholar as well. And I'm so glad he's at EPPC, the Ethics Public Policy Center, where Christianity and the public square meet. He does good work there, too.
I really do like his opinion on things.
Now.
I've got a couple emails. Where's my rib recipe? I think I mentioned, so I switched the email provider that I was using to send out the recipes, and it apparently crashed. And so if you haven't texted the word recipe to 33777 yet, you can, and I'll have it out shortly. The rib recipe for pellet grills for smokers. It's actually really easy to do. Yeah, I got some actually baby back ribs from Omaha Steaks and did them this week, and they were really good. All right, we got to go to the phones to Athens, Georgia, and Rooster calling. Welcome to the program.
Good morning, and Mr. Eric, I thoroughly enjoyed your last little segment. But anyway, I was calling. I got an email from Jay Sekulow and his group.
Yeah.
Talking about Biden sending money to Planned Parenthood, and I'm curious what that is. What is that part of this new tax thing, and what chance they have to stopping that?
So-
They've got a partition.
Yeah, okay.
going
So
around.
that they can't stop the Trump administration did an executive order that stopped money going from any institution that performs abortions. And the Biden administration rolled that back, and the Democrats put a specific allocation of funds in for Planned Parenthood, essentially as a, we're sorry you haven't gotten money in the last 2 years. Here's you some extra cash to kill kids. And so they're getting millions of Planned Parenthood in a specific allotment to perform abortions is getting millions of dollars in the COVID relief plan. And there's no way to stop it. To answer the second question you had, they're allowed to do it, and they're going to do it. So this is the
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, logical fallout of a death cult being in charge of public policy now with Boko Haram, a terrorist group. The wokes and the abortionists together, and many of them are the same, are intending to do this. This is what people voted for. And you know, the irony here is they really didn't. And this is where I think the Democrats are overplaying their hand is people voted to get rid of Donald Trump. And they also voted overwhelmingly to get rid of a lot of the Democratic wokes. And the Republicans misinterpreted the election as Donald Trump had it stolen from him. The Democrats misinterpreted it as the nation's rejecting Donald Trump and his brand of culture fighting. Actually, the nation rejected the defund the police people, and they essentially rejected the biblical donkeys. They didn't like, objectively, the data shows, didn't care for Donald Trump. And it was actually white men who shifted overwhelmingly. White men shifted more than white women shifted away from Donald Trump. And now those white men are all out of jobs. And they're going to come back in 2022. That is one reason I think that I saw today that Georgia has been declared a gubernatorial toss-up. Now, part of the reason Georgia is being declared a gubernatorial toss-up is because they are deeply worried about a nasty, nasty fight between Brian Kemp and Doug Collins or someone else at the gubernatorial level. They're worried about a really nasty fight. And if Kemp can get out of having a really nasty fight in the primary, he's going to win. Whoever challenges Kemp is probably setting Stacey Abrams up for victory in November, and that's why it's a toss-up right now. But given what the Democrats are about to do to the economy and Joe Biden overplaying his hand, there's a way to forestall that, I suspect. We will see where it winds up. Now, when we come back, I actually, I'm not a fan of Marjorie Taylor Greene, but I got to sing her praises on radio. I'm already getting people mad at me for saying something nice about her, but she's doing something that I think is important. The question is it the only thing she can do, or can she do more? We'll find out. But I do want to say something nice about her because she's doing something really good when we come back. Hello and welcome. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number, if you want to be a part of the program, is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. Really glad to have you with me. Dan Crenshaw is going to join me after 11:30, the congressman from Texas. We'll just make this the House Representative segment for a little bit. I come to praise Marjorie Taylor Greene. We're in this weird environment now where, like, for example, if I criticize Donald Trump, even after I said I'd support him, even after the Vice President Pence had come on with me on stage at my gathering, I'd been to the White House, I'd talked repeatedly to the president on the phone. If I criticize, well, you just hate him, you're still never Trump. I still get called never Trump despite having said I'd support the president in 2020. If I said anything nice about the president, it was, well, you sell out. You're worried about getting your radio show canceled. Believe it or not, there are still people in America who just tell you what they think. And I try to be one of those people who tries to be as transparent as I am. Way too transparent with y'all. The people around me complain. The security at my office complains all the time. Why are you telling people this stuff? Well, I try to live my life with you guys and try not to keep anything from you. I see people all the time who live these well-curated lives on social media, and you think you know the person, and it turns out they're insane. You've got no idea who they really are. I try to just tell you what I think. And one of the things about telling you what I think is sometimes there are people who I may not care for, who I think do good things, and I want to appreciate that they've done something good. I have said nice things about the Speaker of the House in Georgia, David Ralston, over the last couple of weeks because he's done several things I thought were commendable. And I get people mad at me. I thought you hate him. Why are you saying something nice about that SOB? Well, because he did something worth saying something nice about. Or if I criticize somebody, oh my gosh, I can't believe you would criticize that person. I thought you liked that person, you traitor. I got accused a while back of being in the governor's pocket somehow for not criticizing the governor, that I was paid to say nice things about him. I actually like the guy. I've criticized him plenty, but I really like the guy and tend not to criticize him because I think by and large he's getting the blame for a lot of stuff other people are doing. And that leads me to Marjorie Taylor Greene. I'm not a fan. In fact, if you get a copy of New Yorker, they have a profile of her, and you will find that I said she was bat poop crazy, except I didn't say poop, and I think she's kind of nuts. Speaking of thruples from the last hour, I mean, she's had these relationship issues, among other things, and she likes the media attention. She definitely likes to fight. She's perfect for the age of Trump. She would, quarrel over a penny on the sidewalk. But occasionally it comes in handy, and she should be praised for something she's doing, something I have long advocated. The House Freedom Caucus members, Jody Heiss is involved. She's involved, and others. I think it's worth praising. And that is the Democrats trying to ram through the COVID relief package and everything else in the House. And Marjorie Taylor Greene got the bright idea of forcing votes on everything and slowing the train down. Now, you should know she's getting withering criticism from the Republican establishment for doing this on the grounds that she has no strategy here. These are all tactics. There is no strategy. It's just making people mad. It's making the Republicans mad. It's forcing everybody to come in and vote. Where's the strategy here? And I get that. But that's what the Republicans always say. The Republican leadership never has a strategy to stop or slow down anything. And then when someone tries, they get mad at the person. Well, where's your strategy? Where's your strategy? You don't have a strategy. This is all you're capable of doing. It's just a tactic. It's not going to do anything. They're going to do it anyway. You're just making us all miserable. Apparently, the Republican leaders don't actually, they want to get elected to Congress. They don't want to actually go work. And they resent like hell that Marjorie Taylor Greene is making them work. They actually have to show up, and audacity upon audacity, they have to cast a vote. Now, I get it is a fair and accurate statement worth pointing out that, yes, in fact, there are problems when you don't have an underlying strategy for anything. And there is a valid criticism that the only thing Marjorie Taylor Greene is good at is fighting to get attention. She'll do whatever it takes to get attention. And typically it's fighting. She's very good at fighting, but can she actually legislate? Can she navigate something through the House of Representatives? Right now, she can't. I am told very reliably from Democrats and Republicans that essentially Nancy Pelosi has said nothing she supports is going to get passed without broad Democratic support, that they will not give her a hearing on her own ideas. If she aligns with someone else, particularly a Democrat, more likely than not, it's going to kill their bill unless it's something the Democratic leadership wants. People are avoiding her like the plague, and it has a lot to do with her voting on January 6th. If all Marjorie Taylor Greene can do is fight, there are moments to deploy her into the fight. If all she can do is fight for attention and can't actually be deployed appropriately, then there's a problem. If she's incapable of representing her constituents with good constituent service and taking care of their needs while in Congress, yes, there are problems, and the voters can deal with that. But right now, I appreciate the fact that she's willing to drag out the business of the House, however painful it may be, however often the Republican establishment turns their nose up and says, well, I just think she's just dragging out the inevitable and it's making our lives difficult. Good. It should be painful for everyone. If it's painful for you as a Republican, it's painful for the Democrats as well. And I genuinely think it's a good thing. I've been writing about this very thing since 2006, 2007, when the Democrats took back Congress. Actually, no, before that, 2004, 2005, with the at the time, Republican Study Committee was actually really conservative. It's headed back that way now that Jim Banks is in charge. The leadership of the Republican Party tried to gut the Republican Study Committee, which led to the rise of the House Freedom Caucus. And I think, I've been writing since then that what conservatives should do is force votes on everything. Conservatives should force everyone to show up and go on record, drag everything out, make everything as painful as possible. In fact, I said if I were in the House or Senate, I would, every single time someone wanted to do something, I would force a vote. And I would say, parliamentary inquiry. Is the Affordable Care Act still on the books? And if they said yes, I would keep going until the Affordable Care Act were repealed. That was my articulated strategy, is that you take one person, put them in the House or the Senate, and literally just park their butt on the floor of the House or Senate and object to everything. And every time someone raises an issue, say, is the Affordable Care Act still the law of the land? And when they said, yep, say, well, I'm going to keep up my objections. You extract maximum pain for the Democrats doing stupid things. You should. And she's doing it. And as she's getting withering criticism from her own side for doing it, I think it is a fine and commendable act that she is doing. And whether I like her or not, I think she deserves praise and applause for doing what other Republicans turn their nose up at, the actual hard work of slowing down the trains in the House of Representatives and daring to be a jerk just to prove a point that the Democrats have no business spiraling the national debt $1.9 trillion more dollars. It's just ridiculous. So good for her. And to the House Freedom Caucus for joining her. Now, I want to move on. Kroger. That's a heck of a shift, isn't it? From Marjorie Taylor Greene to Kroger. Well, Kroger is shutting down grocery stores. I told you all this was going to happen. Now, Kroger also owns a grocery store chain called Ralph's. Not Rouse, that's Louisiana. Ralph. Ralph. The name of a man, Ralph. Kroger announced Wednesday it's closing 3 more stores in Los Angeles. Why? Because the city of Los Angeles has passed a hero pay ordinance. It requires a $5 minimum wage increase or $5 salary increase per hour for grocery and pharmacy workers. Now, there will be 2 Ralph stores and a Food for Less store, all of them owned by Kroger, that will be shut down May 15th. They're already underperforming. They were already going to begin the phase-out process of these 3 stores because they're underperforming. but Los Angeles has sped up their closure by raising the wage rate. The Ralphs and Food for Less associates already earn $18 an hour. With health care and pension benefits, their total compensation is $24 an hour, according to Kroger. This is a bridge too far for them. Now, there are lots of progressives saying, I can't believe they don't want to pay their workers a fair wage. They're making $24 an hour. The left only wants a $15 an hour minimum wage. If Kroger were to cut their wage rate to $15 an hour, the left would be appalled that Kroger is paying them exactly what the left thinks they should be paid. And yet, because they're paying them $24 an hour, but don't want to pay them an additional $5 an hour, and the stores are already losing Kroger money, so they're shutting them down, suddenly Kroger's the bad guy. Why? At some point, you got to be willing to acknowledge basic economics have an impact. At some point, you got to be willing to acknowledge that you can't get rid of basic economics. Kroger cannot print money to pay its workers. Kroger is not the federal government. And so it is doing what it has to do. Here's their statement. It's never our desire to close a store, but when you factor in the increased costs of operation during COVID-19, consistent financial losses at these 3 locations, and an extra pay mandate that will cost nearly $20 million over the next 120 days, it becomes impossible to operate these 3 stores. Would you prefer that Kroger subsidize these 3 stores and keep these people employed such that Kroger winds up undermining its entire company and has to shut down and put everyone out of work? That seems to be the alternative here. The stores are already losing money. Now they're going to lose more money because of what Los Angeles has done. And people think Kroger's the bad guy here. No, the people insisting on increases in wages by government mandate are the bad people. The people who insist the government should come in and impose a wage increase on private businesses, they're the bad guys. The people who want the government to tell a private business what to pay an employee, that's a bad person. If you don't want to work there, you don't have to work there. Kroger not only pays them above the minimum wage, but gives them benefits as well. And those stores are losing money. How is this controversial? I don't know how I'm the bad guy for pointing it out, and I don't know how Kroger is the bad company for closing down 3 money-losing stores where now they're going to lose even more money. At some point, the company, believe it or not, has to make a profit. There's nothing wrong with making a profit for shareholders. You may not like it, but it's the way business is done, except in communist countries. And even then, stores still make a profit to pay the communist oligarchs, which is really what the left wants, is they want Kroger's profit for themselves. The shakedown artists from Boko Haram are going to show up and scare the company into forking over money. It's what they do. So Jesse Jackson and Al Sharpton pioneered it back in the day. And now the environmentalists do it and the wokes do it too. Give us money or else. The only difference between the mob and the wokes is that the mob, the mafia, sends Big Louie. The wokes actually send a real mob to ransack your business. And that's what they would undoubtedly like to do to Kroger. Good for Kroger for standing up to this nonsense. They're not the bad guys here. They've been employing these people and giving them benefits, and now they can't because the government and the wokes are forcing them to do what they don't have the resources to do.
You can follow Erick around social media at
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. The phone number is 877-97-ERIC, 877-973-7425. I have been just dying to get to the story this week. There's been so much stuff. Yeah, I'm only now able to get to it. The New York Times. Notice, Ben Shapiro actually pointed this out to me. Have you noticed all of the attacks on the Lincoln Project in the mainstream media? They were perfectly willing to use the Lincoln Project to bring down Donald Trump. And suddenly they're no longer convenient. Now that Trump is gone, the Lincoln Project, they can be honest about it. This is something you always suspect this is the case that goes on with the media when they circle the wagons to protect a lot of people who help the media, and then when they're no longer useful, tear them down. That's what's happening with the Lincoln Project. It was always a terrible group. Here's the headline: Inside the Lincoln Project, Secrets, Side Deals, and Scandals. A few days before the presidential election, the leadership of the anti-Trump Lincoln Project gathered at the Utah home of Steve Schmidt, one of the group's co-founders, and listened as he plotted out the organization's future. None of the dissident Republican consultants who created the Lincoln Project a year earlier had imagined how wildly successful it would be, pulling in more than $87 million in donations and producing scores of viral videos that doubled as a PSYOP campaign intended to drive President Trump to distraction. Confident that a Biden administration was on the horizon, Mr. Schmidt, a swaggering former political advisor to John McCain and Arnold Schwarzenegger, pitched the other attendees on his post-Trump vision for the project over a breakfast of bagels and muffins, and it was ambitious. 5 years from now, there will be a dozen billion-dollar media companies that don't exist today, he told the group. I would like to build one and would invite all of you to be part of that. In fact, Mr. Schmidt and the three other men who started the Lincoln Project, John Weaver, Reed Galen, and Rick Wilson, had already quietly moved to set themselves up in the new enterprise, drafting and filing paperwork to create TLP Media in September and October. Its aim was to transform the original project, a super PAC, into a far more lucrative venture under their control. This was not the only private financial arrangement among the four men. Shortly after they created the group in late 2019, they had agreed to pay themselves millions of dollars in management fees, three people with knowledge of the deal said. One of the people said a contract was drawn up among the four men, but not signed. A spokeswoman for the Lincoln Project was broadly dismissive and said no such agreement exists and nothing like it was ever adopted. The behind-the-scenes moves by the four original founders showed that whatever their political goals, they were also privately taking steps to make money from the earliest stages and wanted to limit the number of people who would share the spoils. Over time, the Lincoln Project directed about $27 million, nearly a third of its total fundraising, to Mr. Galen's consulting firm, from which the four men were paid, according to people familiar with the arrangement. Conceived as a full-time attack machine against Mr. Trump, the Lincoln Project's public profile soared last year as its founders built a reputation as a creative yet ruthless band of veteran operators. They recruited like-minded colleagues, and their scathing videos brought out elation from the left and an aura of mischievous idealism for what they claimed was their mission, nothing but to save democracy. They also hit upon a geyser of cash, discovering that biting attacks on a uniquely polarizing president could be profitable. Then it all began to unravel. See, it turns out that John Weaver has boy issues. John Weaver, apparently, though married, has been sexually harassing young men for a while. And people inside the company, inside the Lincoln Project, knew it last year. The crisis surrounding Mr. Weaver and the splintering of the group's leadership have cast the future of the Lincoln Project into doubt. Within weeks of the meeting in Utah, a battle erupted over who would control the group's board. There were threats to sue, to start rival groups, to back different board slates. Millions of dollars would be moved. Even people once associated with the group, including George Conway, have called for its dissolution, but Mr. Schmidt's faction intended to continue it as a modern media campaign. Save for Mr. Weaver, the project's top leadership, Schmidt, Galen, and Wilson, has not changed. They're hoping that enough of its 500,000 donors will remain. Now, you need to understand that these are political mercenaries. I think they would probably slit each other's throat if it came to it. It's nuts that these guys, first of all, there was clearly a cover-up involving Weaver. People within the company are claiming harassment, among other things. They're political mercenaries. They want to make a lot of money. And this is one of the things about Republican consultants these days is one of the reasons Donald Trump was successful in his first term or in his first campaign was that Republican consultants these days tend to bleed candidates dry, whether they win or lose. That happened to Donald Trump, frankly, in the second campaign. The consultants bled him dry. There was not enough money for Trump because the consultants got beach houses for their beach house. And same thing's happening with the Lincoln Project. They're greedy operators, and they're willing to cover up their moral failings while they attack others' moral failings. But more importantly, they don't really have principle. They're in it for themselves. There's no guiding principle other than a love of money, and that becomes a problem for anybody. Hello there, it is Erick Erickson here. Dan Crenshaw is going to join me here in a little bit. He is delayed, but while we're waiting, there's something I want to talk about. And I want to play you a clip from Chris Cuomo to set the tone.
They are going to be against everything Biden tries to do because they are opposing him. That's why they tried to pitch pandemic relief as you paying for them and their kids. What's the message there? Ugly and obvious. Division by deception. They only want a rescue plan for Dr. Seuss. And by the way, facts first, it was his estate that decided not to publish more of certain books. No one else made that happen. Rescue Mr. Potato Head, they say. Rescue the royals from any reckoning of racism. Because, you know, there's something about that Meghan Markle that seems, I don't know, dark. Yeah, you mean like her skin? Is she forgetting her place? Is that why you're so upset about it? Everything they say about Markle is code for dividing us by color. Remember this day. This was the chance to make up for the pandemic denial that they enabled. Instead, they decided to double down. Period.
First of all, I want to say something about CNN. Despite regular attacks on Fox News for its overnight commentary shows, CNN itself has decided to go into the business of having partisan opinion hosts in the evening, Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo. And I got to say, when you compare the product between MSNBC and CNN, head and shoulders, the partisans on MSNBC are more articulate, have better points. It's like the writers are not really into it at CNN. They want to actually be a news network, and Cuomo and Lemon and I guess Jeff Zucker want to do overnight commentary to try to be competitive. They've decided the news doesn't really work, so they pretend to be in the news, and they're not really not. And the workers have really bought into the idea they're in the news. It's just not smart. It's boilerplate. I can do like what is your bad impression of a progressive, and that's what you get from Chris Cuomo and Don Lemon. Whether you like Rachel Maddow, Chris Hayes, Lawrence O'Donnell, or the like on MSNBC, or Joy Reid, well, I don't know. Joy Reid's kind of the exception. She's a real idiot. But the others, they're smart and they're thoughtful, even if I disagree with them. And they come up with credible progressive commentary that, while I may disagree with it, it kind of makes you think. On CNN, they don't do this. On CNN, Don Lemon and Chris Cuomo lower your ID. It's like the Billy Madison quote. We are all dumber for having listened to that from Chris Cuomo. And that's, I mean, it should come with a brain damage warning to listen to Lemon and Cuomo's dialogues together. But the larger point is this. The reason that Chris Cuomo is doing this is, one, he's not a very thoughtful person, and two, he doesn't, by being a not thoughtful person, understand what the GOP is doing. Republicans understand the culture rhetoric works, and those people in the media bubble do not. People in the media bubble have embraced the Democrats' talking point that this is a wonderful piece of legislation, that the Republicans were unified against it, and it's going to come back to haunt them. They said the same thing, by the way, about the GOP and Obamacare, despite polls showing it was deeply unpopular. They are running out polls right now. I haven't seen the media obsess over popularity polls of a piece of legislation in years, like they're doing right now, to try to tell everyone it's popular. It seems very coordinated. And oftentimes what happens is it's not initially coordinated. It is the Democrats push out a talking point to their friends in the media, and then people in the media are like, oh yeah, this is good, and they run with it. And that's what's going on here. They're ridiculing the Republicans over outcries of Dr. Seuss and over Mr. Potato Head and Peter Pan and the like. And the bottom line is that voters are going to remember the left doing what they did to Dr. Seuss, and they're not going to remember the COVID legislation. And the Democrats don't want to understand it, don't process it, are hostile to the idea. The amount of people who have ridiculed me in the last 48 hours for pointing out that the Republicans constantly talking about cancel culture and the wokes, they're actually going to do fairly well at the polls compared to people who think, oh, the COVID package is so wonderful. When you get out of control inflation, it's not going to be so wonderful. But more than that, people aren't going to remember the details of the COVID plan in a year from now. But they are going to remember that they live in fear now because the media, idiots like Chris Cuomo and the like, will try to cancel them if they dare say something that's conservative. You're a Christian in the public square these days, just watch out. CNN, MSNBC, and the like, they're coming for you. And this is one of the major reasons Black and Hispanic voters have shifted to the right, is because culturally they're conservative. And now you got Boko Haram has taken over the Democratic Party, waging a terror campaign from college campuses against anyone who says anything that might actually be conservative. They've all got to be canceled. And the voters privately go into the polls and vote Republican. The Democrats may ridicule Republicans for talking about a potato head, but the voters understand what's going on. Now, joining me to talk about COVID and so much more out there is Congressman from Texas. You've probably heard of him, Dan Crenshaw. How are you, sir?
Hey, I'm doing well. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, absolutely. Glad to have you here. So I want to get your take just out of the gate on the COVID package, where I don't know if you've heard this, but the polls say everyone loves this. You just don't ask people what's in it because no one seems to know.
Right, and I think it gets less popular as people discover that it's a ton of waste and not very much for actual COVID healthcare. So only about 9% is for COVID healthcare. A huge amount of it is for states and localities. Basically, in many cases, giving them much larger budgets than they've ever had before. In states like California, by the way, they had a surplus this year. So, people will start to realize that, start to be educated on it, and they support it less. But let me have a different angle on this real quick. If it is indeed this popular, because look, let's be honest, Eric, free money is popular.
Yeah.
You tell people they're going to get a check, and it's amazing, right? It's popular. It doesn't mean it's good policy. And we have to stop conflating what is popular with good policy. Obviously, giving money to people is going to be popular, but it's not the American way. And we have to disabuse ourselves of this notion that we can be bribed by big government. Okay. Well over 100 million people who were getting these direct cash payment checks never lost their job. And as conservatives, we have to kind of maybe do some reckoning and say, look, there was a lot of conservatives that were clamoring for that, even having never lost a job, never even lost income. This isn't right. This is not right. And this is not who we are. This is not who we are as Americans. That's a European thing to do. That's kind of big government welfare handout. So we got to stop this.
Yeah, not only do we have to stop it, I wonder how much longer this is sustainable. When you got Larry Summers coming out saying, guys, this is going to cause inflation, you've got clearly worries in the bond market about inflation, and you've got I don't even know what the national debt is now. I guess you need somebody to walk down by Chip Roy's office where he's got his debt clock hanging up and see how much it is, but it's like 28 trillion now. I get the sense none of this is sustainable.
It's absolutely not. Inflation is real. We might be able to handle it longer than most other countries that have gone through a debt crisis. But the thing about the debt crisis is you only know it's happening when it's happening. It's very difficult to predict. No economist will be able to tell you what the tipping point is for a debt to GDP ratio. But it will come eventually. There will be a point where people just do not believe that we can pay back this debt, especially when we start paying more for interest on the debt than we would our Department of Defense. Okay, that's going to be a bad tipping point. We're very close to that already. It's simply not sustainable. It's not good economics, and it's not fair to our future generations. Okay, there's the reality is that in the future, when you've got, right now we're at around $30 trillion. When your kids are all growing up, they're probably going to be around 40, 50 trillion. What can you really spend money on at this point? You're going to have to look at tax increases to maintain some stability. You're going to have to look at entitlement reform. And that freaks everybody out on the right and the left. But we have to have adult conversations in America, just finally actually have them and talk about what's driving this debt in the long term and get it under control so that when we do have emergency situations like we did last year, we can actually spend the money. Look, I mean, a lot of these COVID bills have been bipartisan because there's an understanding that in dire times, you need to spend some money. Now again, this bill is not emergency spending. Half of it doesn't even get spent until next year, and a lot of it doesn't really go to people who need it. There's already $1 trillion left unspent, so you cannot make the argument that this particular bill is an emergency. But you do need that flexibility in the long term when you do have emergencies, and you can't have that flexibility if you've got a 200% debt to GDP ratio.
Yeah, that ratio is I worry about it for my kids and their kids eventually. Now, while we're somewhat hamstrung on what we can do in the future financially, and Republicans right now control nothing in Washington, what do you, as you haven't been in Congress a real long time, but how do you see a path forward for the GOP?
I think we should be optimistic. Your Georgia listeners have not felt optimistic for a while.
Right, yeah.
I get it. You should reverse that sentiment. We've got a good path to taking back the House, only if we stick together. Okay, I don't like these manufactured divisions that I see, and look, I think that's why we lost the Georgia Senate races, because of manufactured divisions. People made up reasons to be against each other within the Republican Party, and that's a really bad path forward. It's happening. I think it could be worse. I think we'll kind of grow out of it, I hope. But if we stick together and we stick to principles, right? This is what we're for. This is how conservative principles work better for America. These are the policies being put out there by the Democrats. This is not what you want. I know they talk about being nicer and more compassionate and all that, but when you really dig into their policies, they're the opposite of compassion. Here's why. If we can continue to talk about it like this, that we are the party of freedom and prosperity and opportunity, and getting the government out of your way and fixing things in a smart, sustainable, fiscally sustainable way that delivers you the most amount of freedom, then I think we can win forever. It's going to be a better election year next time, and we can put a lot more brakes on what this administration is doing. Look, I want to deliver some more good news. I mean, look, they haven't gotten rid of the filibuster, and it doesn't look like they'll be able to. We do still have some Democrat senators with some principles in place. And I would remind the conservatives, too, look, when you get really mad that Republicans didn't do everything you wanted when we had all three branches, or the Senate, House, and the executive, this was why, right? Because we kept the filibuster in place. And, yeah, at the time, you're like, just get rid of it. The Democrats, well, that's not a good argument. It's a terrible argument. If we had done that, right now, if we had done that, H.R. 1 would become law. If we had done that, right now we are voting on gun control measures. Those would become law. If we had done that, this would not be a good situation we're in right now. So always respect your institutions. They work for a reason.
I love the argument some Democrats are making right now. Well, the Republicans, if they get back the Senate, they're going to get rid of the filibuster. They just had it and they didn't get rid of it. Closing question for you before we run out of time here. I want to talk about Texas real quick because it has become for the left the butt of jokes after the ice storm and the power. And I realize you're in Congress, you're not at the state level. But what are you guys doing in Texas dealing with, one, the power situation, but also recognizing that the left sees opportunity here to try to say, well, this was all Texas deregulation. We need more regulation now.
Yeah, it's going to be actually fairly easy to debunk that argument. And you're exactly right. That is what the left wants to do. They hate it when people have independence. They only want centralized control. And that's why we're having hearings about the Texas energy grid up here in Washington over this next month, which is strange. Like, we really shouldn't be. This is getting handled at the Texas legislature level. They're having really honest conversations down there, and I think they're going to end up in the right place. Reforms do need to be made, but it is not the reform isn't necessarily connecting the grid to FERC and the rest of the U.S. Grid, because I mean it wouldn't have helped in this time because everybody was having blackouts. Right. So you wouldn't have been able to suck energy from anywhere else. And frankly, we would, if that had been the case, we might have hurt grids near us. No, the actual problem, this is what the left doesn't want to admit, is that there's been an underinvestment in baseload power in Texas, just like there has, in places like California and around the country. And that's because of our pricing structure. It's because of federal subsidies that make that causes an overinvestment in renewables. And they'll say, oh no, it's not a dollar for dollar thing. It's not like it's a zero sum game. Well, then why are renewable companies bragging about how they're sucking up all the investment and there's none left for oil and gas? Okay, because I can show you that.
Right.
So the problem is, look, here's a fact that you can never escape from. You're going to need at least 100+% of your demand able to be met by a baseload power source, which is coal, nuclear, or gas. That will always be the case, no matter what, all the time, no matter where you are in the world.
Mm-hmm.
So until we acknowledge that fact, and then you can add renewables on top of that, for cleaner energy sources, and if we change up our pricing mechanisms in Texas, we can go back to a healthy mix.
Well, look, I appreciate the conversation and particularly the thoughts on the power grid here. Thank you very much for stopping by, and best of luck to you navigating the Democrats over the next couple of years.
My job. I like to do it.
All right. Thank you very much. Congressman Dan Crenshaw from Texas joining me up in Washington today, where it's starting to warm up there. Good guy, intriguing guy. You've already got presidential buzz about him. I don't think he actually will do it. But I'm sure he's got a bright future in politics out there.
There's not my truth or your truth.
Hello there. It is Erick Erickson here. All right. I got to play you this audio from Mitch McConnell.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. The president will soon be signing the $1.9 trillion stimulus bill. I think the most distinct features are the following. Number one, it solved New York's budget problem. So finally, some good news for Governor Cuomo. Senator Schumer has solved his financial issues. They've also, by the way, solved the financial problems of San Francisco. They've also prevented state governments from lowering taxes. This is a classic example of big government Democratic overreach in the name of COVID relief. And we all know that what we should have been doing and would have been done had this been a bipartisan discussion instead of a jam the other side approach is $500 or $600 billion directly targeted at the problem. But of course, the $1.9 trillion problem, as we said repeatedly, the $1.9 trillion package, as we said repeatedly, only had about 1% or less for vaccines, 9% or less for health care. So I think this is actually one of the worst pieces of legislation I've seen pass here in the time I've been in the Senate.
Listen, here's the thing. I know if you're a Democrat listening, well, of course McConnell would say that because, McConnell, he's one of those Republicans, and here's the bottom line on the COVID package for people who think it's grand and glorious. They don't know any of the details. Less than 9%, as Dan Crenshaw pointed out, goes to actual COVID relief. Half of the money, more than $500 billion of the money, isn't even going to be spent until next year. The bulk of the money goes to bail out state budgets, but also prevent states from cutting taxes when they get the money, even if they were already in a fiscally healthy point where they wanted to cut taxes. That's one of the things that's being missed here, too, is that a lot of conservative states were doing well and wanted to cut their taxes, and now they can't cut their taxes because this piece of legislation prohibits them from doing so if they want the federal money. Now, the Supreme Court has ruled in the past that you can't use federal allocations to coerce states into fiscal decisions. They may have a constitutional argument. I'm not sure. I would take my chances and file a lawsuit. Frankly, if I were George, if I were Chris Carr, Georgia's Secretary of State, I'd file a lawsuit with this money coming out and saying, listen, we already had a tax cut pending in our state legislature based on our own ability to get our economy open again when everyone else told us not to. It worked. And now we're going to get penalized for doing the right thing. I think they got the Republicans, I genuinely think they have a real opportunity here to file a lawsuit and get some better court precedent on the particular issue of the constitutional precedent that the federal government cannot coerce the states into taking particular fiscal action through the giving or withholding of money. Frankly, I think there should be a constitutional amendment that says the federal government cannot give or withhold money to states in order to induce states to take or not take action, to pass or not pass legislation, to regulate or not regulate entities, individuals, and the state. I think there should be a constitutional amendment that does that. Congress, of course, likes to give money to states with strings attached and say, well, it's for this, and you can only do these things. And the Supreme Court gives the federal government some leeway to do that, but affirmatively says that Congress cannot shape state fiscal policy by doing that. And I think the fact that Georgia was already in the middle of passing a tax cut and now can't because of this package gives the state the opportunity with Chris Carr to file a federal lawsuit once Biden signs it into law and say they're directing what we can and cannot do with policies we were already going to impact. And I think you'll get a favorable constitutional ruling for Georgia if they did that.